So, hello. Hello, I hope I'm audible. So, welcome everybody to the Water Forum of the 14th edition of the Bengal Chambers Environment and Energy Conclave. So, I have with me Mr. Arun Kumar Mukherjee, who is the mentor of the Energy and Environment Committee of the Bengal Chamber. And in this session, we would be discussing water from policies to infrastructure to water as resource. With this, I would request Mr. Mukherjee to please take this session forward.
Dr. Obijit Mukherjee and Mr. A.B. Pandya. Water is the lifeblood of humanity. With it, communities thrive. Water is as important to the world economy as oil or data. Though most of the planet is covered in water, more than 97% of it is salt water. Fresh water accounts for the rest, although most of it is frozen in glaciers, leaving less than 1% of the water available to support human and ecological processes. Every year, we withdraw around 4.3 trillion cubic meter of fresh water from the planet's water basins. We use it in the agriculture, about 70%, industry around 19%, and household around 11% globally. These percentages vary widely across the globe. In the US, industrial usage 37% is almost as high as agriculture of 40%. In India, on the other hand, agriculture claims 85 to 90% of water withdrawals, while 2% is put to work for industry. China's withdrawal are 65% agriculture, 22% industrial, and 13% household. But when the supply and the demand of the fresh water are misaligned, the delicate environmental, social, and financial ecosystems on which we all rely at risk. Climate change, demographic shift, and explosive economic growth all will aggravate existing water issues. The availability of fresh water also varies greatly by location. The majority of the world's fresh water is divided among 410 named basins, which are areas of land where all water that falls or flows through that region ultimately ends at a single source. These include Huang He, Nile, Colorado River, Indus, and many others. Of these 400 named basins, almost a quarter are considered high-stressed, meaning that their ratio of annual withdrawal to total available annual supply exceed 40%. About half of these are located in 3 countries with enormous water needs and high economic activity: China, India, and United States. According to the Composite Water Management Index report released by Niti Aayog in 2018, 21 major cities, namely Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, and others, are reaching zero groundwater level access for 100 million people. However, 12% of India's population is already living the day zero scenario due to excessive groundwater pumping, inefficient and wasteful water management system, and years of deficient rains. As per a global study, many of the world's basins would see a supply decline of around 10% by 2030 and up to 25% by 2050. According to UN estimate, 1 in 4 people may live in a country affected by chronic shortages of fresh water. The World Bank estimates that the crisis could slow GDP by 6% in some countries by 2050 as well. Water stress is a risk multiplier. Alone, it is a powerful risk with the potential to upend socioeconomic and ecological systems. It becomes uncontrollably detrimental when compounded with other risks such as those related to food and energy systems, politics, and infrastructures. Two-thirds of the businesses have substantial risk in direct operation or in their value chain. As water stress grows, industries will experience the risk in four forms: physical, regulatory, reputational, and stakeholder. The water issue is the reverse of the carbon problem. The cause is global, but its manifestation is highly spatial and can be addressed in a concentrated way. There are three spheres of influence that companies can affect to help mitigate water stress in direct operations, supply chain, and wider basin health. Most of the industries are implementing water measurement and reporting practices, exploring technologies for reducing water consumption through recycle, reuse, and efficient utilization. Another significant initiative is the Water Resilience Coalition, a creation of the UN Global Compact's CEO Water Mandate, launched in March 2020 with a water resilience pledge that binds signatory companies to a set of water goals to be addressed by collective action in water-stressed basins. As per the latest IPCC report, climate change with the increased temperature will add further stress and uncertainties to water supply and water-based ecosystems. This will compel for an ecosystem-based approach for any water system management. There is a need for greater engagement with communities and stakeholders who depend on water for various reasons. The upstream measures need to be taken to ensure that a river maintains a minimum flow or aviral dhara, which is required for all water bodies. The government policies should enable greater agency for all water stakeholders and not just see water as a commodity, but take into consideration the sociology, the environment, and the economics linked to it. The traditional fragmented approach is no longer viable, and more holistic approach to water management is essential. In India, we are required to implement the integrated water resource management approach that has now been accepted internationally as the way forward for efficient, equitable, and sustainable development and management of the world's limited water resource for coping with the conflicting demands. Thank you. May I now request Dr. Ajay Pradhan, President, Consulting Engineers Association of India and Managing Director, Setas Consulting Solution Services, to share your views.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. First of all, my apology. I'm taking this call and speaking from you at the Imphal airport. Little bit crowded, and I'm not removing my mask. Therefore, you might have some problem in listening to me. But however, I'll try to really do whatever justice. Maybe I'll try to show you some presentation so that will take care of if you don't hear me properly. Sir, can you see my presentation
Yes.
screen? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Am I okay? A little bit of audible or not so bad?
You are absolutely audible. There is no problem.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and good afternoon. And I thank the Bengal Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to speak and share our knowledge on the water and water sector, and looking at a broader of a water environment. As you have already introduced, I am going to speak, actually my intervention will be for 10 minutes. I'll talk essentially how states should develop a model water policy linking to the national water policy. That's what I'm going to really do. I see Mr. Ashwini Pandya Sahab is there. He is the author and he knows most of things. Being in Central Water Commission and helm of affairs, now the Secretary General, he will probably take it further down. But I'll talk about a little bit better on the macro level understanding. Now, here is the context, as you mentioned, Chairman Sir, and actually the problems you have already highlighted. But if you look at, why we need a model water policy for states, that is what we need to really look at. I'll show you, talk to you about why water is so much of the state, not the center. So that I'll talk a little bit of a national water policy, and then how the water as a subject been involved right from the independence. So that's what I'm going to discuss that. There are a number of the intervention or policies being taken by central government, federal government, and more or less most of the states they follow that. You can see the national water policy started first in 87, 2002, 2012. Now further revision going on 2022. And there also Niti Aayog came out with something called composite index to rank the states based on their water uses and efficiencies and so on and so forth. So this is also another initiative taken by the central government. So there is a last committee which was there. It's called Need for Identifying Clear Strategy and Actions, which was under the chairmanship of former member Dr. Mihir. That is also another aspect we have to see. Now, what is happening actually, you must have heard and seen that number of national missions like a Jal Jeevan Mission, Jal Shakti Abhiyan, Prime Minister of Krishi Sanchai. So they are targeting actually rural water supply, the districts which are actually in the index of the water, what do you call it, dry states or non-availability of water, Jal Shakti Abhiyan, so restoration, rehabilitations and water harvesting. So the districts with more than 1,500 blocks, they are under those category. Then we come back with the Prime Minister Krishi Sanchai Yojana. So that's also looking at the irrigation, which is the major sector we are looking at. Now, just to recall our understanding and the memory of what has happened, how things happen, there are two lists, which is entry 56, the list one, where the Parliament actually guarantees that all the major intrastate river basins and projects will be centrally governed. It will be centrally governed, like all the major river basins. Then there is entry 17, which allows the state to do all kind of utilization of the water in their domain, like water supplies, irrigation, canals, drainage, even for industrial water. Now there comes again another entry 20, which is a concurrent list that gives look at the economic and social aspects. Now there are a number of other also entries have been over the years been enacted or acted. But the last one, if you look at last two, basically, one was actually Pollution Control Enactment Act. That's one of the brought in all the state pollution control board in line with the central pollution control board for abating the pollution abatement. The last one, which is actually dam safety bill, which is in 2009, which has been passed by Lok Sabha and required to be passed through the Rajya Sabha. That will bring again all the states as per the legislation required. So those are the aspects about the various macro level and central level how things were happening. But as mentioned that water is in a concurrent list and the states has to take and enact those activities or the laws, and therefore they need to really come out with a kind of a model water policy, how they need to really manage, because central government look at it from the federal point of view, but each state has a different geography, different hydrogeology, hydroclimatology, hydrometeorology settings, and therefore the rainfall, the droughts, the all aspects actually is different. So therefore, one states need to look at from their socioeconomic and their mission, vision, perspective, how the state need to be allocate or look at the water as an integrated manner. So that's what one need to look at. Therefore, national water framework also highlights some of those things which the state probably can look at and follow. the certain things like reuse of wastewater is one of the things which is 12 states of the already adopted, which starting from the Gujarat, the many states. So we still need to really approve this reuse of wastewater in different sectors, non-potable as well as for the agriculture. That's one. You know that when this 2011 things happened, 2014 actually the new government came in, they made it the mandatory that Minister of Water Resource became Minister of Water Resource, River Rejuvenation and Ganga Development. So they brought in restoration rejuvenation to the front as a headline. The ministry actually known as now rejuvenation or restoration. So that's another fact which you can see. Contamination is an issue, as you know that the fresh water actually we are losing, and more groundwater also getting contaminated. Water in agriculture, I leave it to Pandya sir to give some ideas on that. But as you know that water is, the fresh water availability in India, whatever is available, is mostly used by the agriculture, almost 80-90% some states. Therefore, one need to really bring in technology or innovation or the efficiency in cutting down the water which is being unnecessarily being used. And you can see what are the implications. Implication is that, for example, holding the water in the rice field, so there is a greenhouse gas release, and you can see the numbers. Actually, I'm not reading it out for the time, lack of time. Water usage, like 1 kg of rice is going to 3,000 liters. If you can save some water in that, that will really bring a revolution, and you can you can allocate that much of water to there. And I'll tell you how what we have done an intervention. There is an intervention we did for the World Bank. I think in West Bengal we did, and we did also Punjab. And you can see how you can use certain simple technology, wetting and drying period, using the IoT-based sensors and technology. Soil moisture, you look at how much water you hold at what different period of the growing up, right from transplantation to harvesting, and what are the equipments, how you can do this. Not only help you to the minimize our crop water requirement, also increase the productivity. At the same time, also you decrease your energy swing. Look at Punjab, it is a free electricity. So the farmer will go and switch on the machines or the pump. It runs overnight, and then it will, the water which will be delivered to the field is much more what is required, because you are not measuring. It is a free. So therefore, those are the things one can do. And this is not a big thing. It can actually work on the district wise, in the block wise, and all. But it requires a little bit of investment. And this is one way of working on the using the technology for using the water use efficiencies, or improve the water use at the same time energy. Irrigation, and I can just tell you that what actually happened. Actually, look at the first line. We in our exercise we increase the productivity by 4%, which is large, and 17% irrigation we did, and this we did with 30 farmers as a pilot. And also we did the what you call the testing at the same time laboratory. So these are the some of the things one need to look at. And what I would like to see that IoT based irrigation things or alternative wetting and dyeing is one of the aspects to look at. Now this is my last slide. I want to like to stress from here. Days are over when water trading was not there. I think you will slowly see privatization is coming. Water trading will happen. Somebody has a storage and you wanted to sell the water, whether irrigation, drinking water, or for the industrial water. So this is going to happen. It's at the need of the hour. Groundwater, already there is a legislation. It has to come for conservation price, just like you do the forest alternative forest clearance, and you give a equivalent amount of forest or do the plantation at the non-forest land. Similarly, groundwater, whenever you take a license and do this much of water you want to extract for industry or whatever purpose, you have to pay a compensation price or the tariff, and that's also coming very fast, and you will see that. Groundwater contamination is actually not been understood by many, but if you look at certain states like eastern part of UP or Punjab or many parts where there's a high irrigation, irrigation and use of NPK is high, so you can see most of the areas of groundwater is polluted. Even urban, peri-urban, urban areas, the groundwater is also polluted. Water regulator is another aspect. Like you have electricity regulator, you have telecom regulator, you have most of the linear or the utilities having the regulator. Water is unfortunately do not have regulator, being a state subject. I think these are the things one need to look at. The state need to evolve based on their understanding, their economy, their socio-cultural aspect, their geographical setting, and hydrometeorological setting. With this, I thank you, Chairman, for your kind attention and all.
Thank you, Dr. Pradhan. It's an excellent deliberation. In fact, you have covered almost all the facets of the usage and what can be done as of today for the improvement of it. Thank you very much. And also I would like to thank you for maintaining the time schedule with which we are struggling right now.
Yeah,
May I
right,
now
sir.
request Mr. Rudran Kumar, Chief Manager Business Development, and Mr. Akhan Gupta, Manager Finance and Accounts, Swachh Environment Private Limited, to share your thoughts. Please restrict yourself within 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all.
Please unmute.
I
Whatever.
yes.
You unmute. You are unmute, sir.
You are unmuted, sir.
Can you hear us?
It's not coming on
Hello?
the screen.
Are you audible, sir?
Rudra, we can all hear you, but
Yeah. Just a minute.
yeah.
I think BCCI will connect.
Yes. Can you hear us now, sir? Can you hear us, sir, now?
Yeah, Mr. Rudranarayan, we are able to hear you.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Panelist side.
Yes, sir. Screen is visible to you, sir?
Mr. Narayan, can you reshare your presentation once?
Yeah.
Our speaker is not operating.
Yes, sir. Can you see the screen now? Hello?
Hello. Can you see the screen now? I hope this permission is required from the
We can share your screen.
yeah. Host permission is there, madam?
Yeah, you have the sharing rights.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
we are sharing. It is visible in our system, but I don't know whether it is available. See screen?
Sir, your bandwidth is low. Can you switch off your video then reshare it?
Sure.
Video. Yeah, is it better now? Can you see the screen?
No, it is not visible yet.
Okay. Video.
So just speak out our things that we are supposed to tell. That would be better because otherwise we'll lose some time. So I would like to tell about Swachh Environment Limited and its innovative financial models that we use for our water business. And Swachh is an organization which are into this drinking water supply and wastewater treatment business for over a decade. And we are
Sir, your
providing.
presentation is not viewable.
Yes, our presentation is not visible. That's why I'm just telling our experience from the presentation. Whether that will do.
Can you switch it off your video and then reshare because your bandwidth is very low.
Yeah, is it better now, ma'am? Can you hear us and can you see the screen as well?
No, we can hear you, but we cannot share, we cannot see your screen.
So we are sharing the screen, ma'am, but sorry that the bandwidth is low. So what we'll do, we'll continue with our presentation. We'll maybe you can hear it out, hear us out.
Okay,
And then
okay.
if-
Yeah, you can then go ahead.
So Schwarz is basically into this water business for over a decade. We have started our journey since 2011, and we have acquired two big projects in public-private partnership mode. So in this PPP mode, the main concern is that the project that the client used to give us, there are several challenges in this kind of projects. So the main thing is the grant. So always grant is not available, but you take the route of the PPP HAM model. The PPP HAM model that is proposed by National Mission for Clean Ganga for such kind of project is very useful. If you see this model, you will understand that there is a 30 to 40% grants. These are given to the contractor or the concessionaire during the construction period. So this 30 to 40% grant, capital grant, is used for doing the capex work. So it is basically a milestone-based payment, and it helps the bidder or the contractor to do the capex work. But the remaining 60% that need to be financed by the contractor or concessionaire. So in this remaining 60%, it contains the remaining capital expenditure as well as the annuity payment for the interest and the operational expenditure. So in a typical concession agreement for this kind of PPP projects, there is a duration of about 15 years for 15 years duration for operation and maintenance. So a contractor has to operate and maintain their plant for 15 years, and at the same time they need to maintain an escrow account. The government used to deposit their payments in the escrow accounts, and it helps both the parties to get the payments in right time. So in the escrow account, 2 quarters payment is deposited by the government in advance. In a typical structure of a PPP project, there is a SPV which is created by the bidding companies. There could be a consortium of bidders, say a company whose participation interest is 51% and the company B which is having a participation interest of 49%. So they can make a JV and they can form a SPV, that is called a special purpose vehicle. Now this SPV is supported by the government agency or the main client. They used to give the capex grant to this SPV. This government agency, this SPV is also supported by the technology players who used to provide the technology, and the insurers and the lenders. Now there is a regulatory body like the National Mission for Clean Ganga in case of NMCG projects, who are the regulatory authority, and they provide the regulatory support to such kind of SPVs. There is a viability gap for different PPP projects because not all the project receives this initial grants of 30 to 40% in a HAM model. So there is a viability gap funding. So some projects which are cost heavy and their initial costs are very high. In that case, the government agency or the client can provide up to 20% of viability gap funding that helps this kind of project to make viable in future. Now we will discuss about a project, our Haldia project, that will be discussed by my colleague, Mr. Akshan Gupta.
So, like Rudra mentioned about the project regarding Namami Gange and the structure of hybrid annuity, similarly for projects which are already operational, which are doing the operation maintenance currently, those can be taken up under this model of Haldia Water, which is a refurbishment and O&M model. Basically, it is a typical example of the national monetization plan that has been recently announced by our Honorable Finance Minister. In this model, the main clause is that the asset is being leased out to the concessionaire, Haldia Water, by the principal client, that is the Haldia Development Authority, for a term of 15 years, during which we have to upgrade and refurbish the asset to its current value and take up the repairs works which have been not done over the last few years, for which we'll have to pay out a fixed fee of around 8 crore to the authority. There is a performance guarantee also, as well as a fixed annual contract. Apart from the fixed fees, there are also fees which are associated to the revenues that as a company Haldia Water generates, which will be shared with the authority and which will provide even more value to the authority, which was earlier not present while they were operating on its own. While these are the commercial clauses in favor of the authority, for the concessionaire, that is Haldia Water, the biggest plus points are that since this is a take or pay clause, that is minimum 50% of the volume of sales is guaranteed. There is a significant high percentage of revenue collection that is happening. Also, there is typical clauses in the concession agreement that guarantee payment in case there is any default beyond a certain period of time. Along with that, there is also a yearly escalation of the tariff, which is chargeable on the water that is provided by the Haldia Water, that is the concessionaire. Apart from that, the ownership of the asset will remain with SDA, and it will be residing only as a repair and maintenance asset for the concessionaire, that is Haldia Water. Any deterioration in the water quality or any major improvement required in the plant to meet the enhanced water quality will have to be compensated by Haldia Development Authority as well. So while all the normal repair and maintenances are under the scope of the concessionaire Haldia Water, whereas the major refurbish or upgradation works are under the scope of Haldia Development Authority. So how does the revenue mechanism work here? So Haldia Water will bill to the customers on behalf of Haldia Development Authority. Haldia Water is also responsible to collect the money on behalf of Haldia Development Authority, which will all go into a joint escrow account where visibility is there. All the funds are clearly visible, and utilization is also very streamlined as per the concession agreement. First, payment has to be given to the power, which is essential to run the plant. Then the fixed license fee that has to be paid to the authority. And then there is the operation maintenance cost for the concessionaire, that is Haldia Water. After that is paid. So now we will just briefly touch upon the benefits that Haldia, this project, which is supplying water to the entire city of Haldia, has seen. So since we have taken over in November 2019, we have seen a sharp increase in the water, mainly due to the good level of operation maintenance work that has been done. Supply has increased mainly for industrial customers, as well as we have been able to service the demands of municipal customers by tapping in leakages, by arresting non-revenue water and increasing the supply, whereas treating the same amount of water, thereby increasing the profit to the government as well as the organization. While this is on the revenue side, on the cost side, electricity, as you all may know, is a very huge cost in the operation maintenance. And since takeover, we have more than achieved around 5 to 7% of savings and around 7 lakh savings per month directly through the improvement of panels and overall machinery. Under this contract, we have the option of using renewable energy sources, such as solar, for which we are also doing a DPR, a case study, to see the viability. Currently, what we have worked out is it will give us a saving around 20 to 30% of the current value, which is a huge saving again, and that whose benefit will also accrue to the authority. So overall, it's a very, very good asset model which authorities can adopt for monetizing their asset to generate residual cash flow, assured cash flow, which will also improve the delivery and the water quality.
They got disconnected. They got disconnected. Okay. Should we go ahead to the next session? Okay. May I now request Dr. Abhijit Mukherjee, Associate Professor, Geology and Geophysics, IIT Kharagpur, to talk about groundwater condition of India, present status and future possibilities. I know, Dr. Mukherjee, this time slot which is given to you is very, very short. I personally heard you on the CSE webinar, and because of the time constraint, you can take 15 minutes and cover. And we are planning to have a full-fledged program on water session, and there we shall be again requesting all our speakers today to come and share your views. Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mukherjee, and thanks to the BCCI organizers for inviting me in this August to this August audience. As Mr. Mukherjee pointed out, the time is very short. So what I'd like to do is I just highlight a few of the things that we who are doing some studies and research in groundwater in India and across the world would like to say in this water forum. So let me share a few slides that I have prepared. Is my screen visible?
No, it's visible.
Okay. So, okay, as I was introduced, I am Vijit Mukherjee. I teach groundwater and groundwater availability at the Indian Institute of Technology, or what you know as IIT Kharagpur. And I'll be talking about the groundwater scenarios of India, what is the status at present, and what might be the future possibilities. So, the speakers before me, they talked about the water availability and water security. And of course, these are very important aspects and management strategies. But being a scientist, I'll possibly try to take a more, scientific and quantifiable viewpoint. So in India, groundwater is something that has been used for ages, for thousands of years. But that was mostly for, sustenance and survival, mostly for drinking and domestic purposes. But in modern times, if we talk about more societal way of looking at the usage of groundwater, groundwater consists or contribute to about 9% of India's GDP, 8 to 9% of India's GDP. And these 8 to 9% kind of ranges from food production to drinking water to domestic purposes to industrial usage to urban development to industrial beneficiaries. Of this, food production is something which is not that highlighted. I mean, all the other aspects are there, but when we talk about water and groundwater, we are mostly concerned about the drinking water, which is of course the need. But then the groundwater and specifically water at a large is actually more related, or usage is related to irrigational water, which is used for food production. And as you can see from this plot that I borrowed from the Central Water Commission, about 85% of the water usage in our country is related to irrigation purposes or food production. And of this, a major portion is for groundwater. Now, this is becoming more and more important. The water sector is becoming more and important because as we are all converging to the 2030, the year for the for achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that unifies our planet. Goal number 6 explicitly talks about availability of clean water and sanitation. And water at large, and specifically groundwater, is something that the world is looking at, is not only in achieving goal number 6, but possibly achieving all the 17 goals, because water is linked in with all these goals. So it is just not like a hearsay or just some policy that we are going to make in India, but this is a kind of a unified world that we are looking at, where we are going to use the one water concept. Now, if we have to understand like how we're going to get it and what's the requirement and so on, we also need to understand the groundwater issues. Now, you're all very knowledgeable, but I'd just like to highlight that water scarcity, which translates to groundwater scarcity really, has been plaguing our country for the last several years. And it has grown more and more every day. Earlier, only the more water-stressed part of the country were having issues on water scarcity. But in today's time, you get to see this kind of water scarcity pictures even in water affluent parts of the country like West Bengal and Bihar. So this is going to something that is going to intensify even further and possibly going to stay. But when we're talking about water scarcity, almost simultaneously in other parts of the country, we do have water excess. And this water excess, of course, it is some way linked with the excessive rainfall or flooding through rivers. But in the hydrological forum, we know that much of the flooding is also related to the groundwater, the dynamic balance between the surface water and groundwater. So this flood that I'm showing you, or the water excess, is also related to the excess groundwater we have in places. Now, that tells us that, if you have water scarcity in one part of the country and few hundred kilometers down the road, you have water excess, that needs to be, it has to be a thought-provoking challenge, because it is a management issue. So it's just not a, availability of resource issue. It is a management issue, and some kind of bottleneck is there, which we need to, solve together as a scientist, also in the governance and management roles. But either way, whether we have scarcity or excess, we are looking at what we call the drinking water security issues, because we cannot survive without our secured drinking water sources. So in the changing world, this is going to be a game changer on the availability of drinking water at places in our country as well as in other places. The problem is that even if there is drinking water that is available, not all of them are usable for human consumption. This photograph that I'm showing you for water quality and pollution are photographs that I've shot myself for people who have just, done the crime of drinking bad groundwater from the subsurface. Bad groundwater. They have not done any sin or previous life, crime or anything like that. It is just that they have been drinking bad groundwater. And this photograph is taken from parts of West Bengal where people are suffering from arsenic pollution. So taking all of this together, you can understand that there are multifaceted problems. And it is just not, getting the water or treating the water or supplying it to the people, but there has to be a holistic solution. Now, the government of India and the state governments do undertake a lot of efforts in present times, and our previous speakers already mentioned a few of those. To my understanding, while all of these are very beneficial and there are a lot of benefits that we are expecting out of those, one big problem that lies within is the connectivity between these different schemes. And furthermore, with the impending climate change, this is going to aggravate. So again, I don't think we understand climate change that well yet. But if climate change is happening and possibly already started, these issues are going to get aggravated. So it is just not a resource issue, it is a changing resource, a dynamic resource that is going to, the availability is going to change in future, and so would be the resilience, adaptivity, and the management of it in future times. Now, as I mentioned that just getting water is not sufficient, and the quality of water is also very important, the groundwater, because as of today, to my understanding on statistics of the Ministry of Jal Shakti, almost 80% of India, for drinking water purpose, they rely on groundwater, and groundwater is polluted in places. Now, why they are polluted in some places, why they are not in others, that's again a scientific question that we need to answer. The other fact is that India, it is using or it's consuming groundwater, which is possibly twice the level that our nearest water consumers, groundwater consumers, US and China taken together would provide. So India is actually, one of the largest consumer of groundwater in the world. And that provides, or that creates a stress, and it creates an emergency. Why? Because in the Indian subcontinent, which includes India and its 7 neighboring or sister countries, we only have about 3% of the global terrestrial land, but hosting about 23% of the global population, 30% of the global irrigated land. So in no way, you are a business organization, you can no way think that 3% of the global terrestrial land can sustain 1/4 of the global population and 1/3 of the food production of this world. So, an obvious outcome is that the Indian subcontinent, specifically India, is the largest consumer of groundwater in this planet. It's not only the largest consumer of groundwater in this planet at present times, but it's also the largest user of groundwater in human history. And that also tells us that we need to take a more special look at the availability of groundwater in India and where the pollutions are. So if you look at these two maps, which kind of shows the simplified version of, where the aquifers are, or, the geologic media that host the groundwater are, and how they're polluted. What you can literally see is that, the bright blue, the Indus Basin, the Ganges Basin, and Brahmaputra Basin, which occupies about 30% of the terrestrial land of the Indian subcontinent, host almost 70 to 75% of the groundwater reserve of this country, of the subcontinent. Whereas the rest 70% of the landmass only barely have 20-25% of the water reserve. So you can start with an extremely polarized, distribution of resource. The problem is, even if this Indus Ganges Brahmaputra Basin, which also is the densest populated place in the world, have a lot of groundwater. It's prolific in its availability of groundwater. Much of it is polluted by geogenic or natural source pollution like arsenic and fluoride and so on. Sorry. So in the last few years, there have been, about a decade or so, there have been huge uproar in the global media as well as in national media on the possible groundwater depletion or drought that is happening in the subsurface of our great country. So what I have been studying with my colleagues and collaborators and students is to find out how much safe groundwater is available in the subcontinent and what is the future. I would like to stress the word safe here. So here is kind of the decadal groundwater storage change calculation for India. Now, this is done in conjunction with NASA. And what I'm showing you is the NASA data in collaboration with the Ministry of Jal Shakti, which was the Central Groundwater Board, and the Minister of Water Resources, erstwhile Minister of Water Resources. So a combination of these data sets from NASA and the Minister of Water Resources shows you that over the years, the groundwater reserve of this country has changed. And in recent times, it has changed from, you can see the colors from blue to red and red to blue. Now, red is bad and blue is good. Don't go by the exact numbers. They are in a more scientific units, which would need some explanation. But what you can think of is blue is excess groundwater and red is depleted groundwater. So what you can possibly see is that, portions of the northern India, which is the Indus Ganges Brahmaputra Basin, has turned from blue to red, which means which had excess groundwater in 2003 has systematically turned red in 2014. Whereas parts of southern India and western India, which were more red, which were the traditionally water scarce part of the country, which had less groundwater in the past, has now become increased with the groundwater storage. So if you kind of filter out all these noises, you see there are parts of the country where the groundwater storage is increasing, whereas part of the country where the groundwater storage is decreasing. Now these are quantifiable measured values irrespective of sensitization and media highlights. These are real numbers, and much of these real numbers are related to various public policies and government policies that have been taken over the years, as well as human consumption that has happened over these regions. Now, one of the invisible outcome of this happening is that in the northern India, where you saw that the groundwater storage has significantly depleted over the years in the last about 20 years or so, one of the significant or substantial outcome of that is the Ganga River is drying. What I'm showing you are pictures of the Ganga River in the central reaches and the southern reaches. And what you're saying, because of the groundwater which is depleting, and the groundwater which used to feed the Ganga River in the non-monsoon periods, the system is depleting.
Dr. Mukherjee,
so obviously,
another 2 minutes,
I'm
please.
closing. Absolutely, I'm done. What we're looking at is that the Ganga River is on the verge of drying, and if it does happen, by 2050, more than 100 million people are going to have food insecurity in the Ganga Basin or northern India. And as I also mentioned, that there are all these problems of natural pollution. This is one recent outcome that I would like to share with you. Again, based on like 2.7 million measurements that the Jal Jeevan Mission is hosting. We used artificial intelligence to predict the groundwater arsenic pollution, and you can see that much of the Ganga Basin, as well as the Indus and the Brahmaputra Basin, are polluted by natural arsenic, thus exposing the population living herein and drinking untreated water to the risk of developing arsenicosis, which can lead to death. So, in conclusion, we are looking at a scenario where northern and eastern India are losing about 13 cubic kilometers of groundwater every year, whereas as an optimistic view, about 3 cubic kilometers of groundwater is getting restored in parts of southern, central, and western India. And these are related with groundwater policy interventions that have been happening in a very small scale, in a village level, to country scale interventions. Thank you so much, and I'd love to take any questions if you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Mukherjee. In fact, we shall be collecting all the questions from all the participants, and then we shall share with you and get the answers, and then give it back to the audiences. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
May I now request Mr. A.B. Pandya, former Chairman, Central Water Commission, to kindly share your views.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. And I'm thankful to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce for having...
you are not audible.
Okay. Hello, is it better now?
Yeah, yes. Much better. Please go ahead.
So I'm thankful to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce for giving me an opportunity to talk to you with regard to a very important topic of water, especially in the context of climate change that is happening, and a lot of global concern as well as the local concern that we are finding for the phenomena. Presently, since I am working very intensively with the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, which is an apex international organization covering about 80 countries and providing something like the countries together take up about 90% of the irrigated area of the world. The agricultural water management is a very important topic which has not received its due when we are talking in the terms of climate dialogue. Especially as all the speakers before me have been able to tell that the largest share of water is getting consumed by the agriculture. And this is not only a universal fact, but also locally as the development levels go down, the percentage of share of water consumption in agriculture increases drastically. Because then the heavily dependent people on agriculture are there in those kind of countries. So there's a lot of relevance of agriculture water management. And for that, ICID had provided a lot of thought to it, and we came up with a vision 2030, in which we have tried to work out at the global level what are the kind of measures that are needed and what are the interventions that are possible in order to manage the situation of agricultural water, which is going to impact the overall water scenario in a very substantial way. So the roadmap that was created with the support of the various national committees, which are the nodal agencies in each of the member countries, and a vision was articulated that we have to have a water secure world free of poverty and hunger through sustainable rural development. The real issue of water management lies especially at the rural level, because the rural level is the one where the consumption of water, especially in the agriculture, takes place. And for that, certain goals are required to be achieved. Number one and foremost goal is to enable higher crop productivity with less water and energy. This has got a very significant impact. In fact, when we talk about the climate dialogue, this particular issue is not really brought about in a very significant way. The issue is that as far as the other phenomena are concerned, like the melting of the ice caps or the melting of the glaciers, these will have impact in a different footing. But the real impact will come if our crop productivity decreases or if we are not able to maintain our crop productivity. Because climate change is not a single phenomena. Climate change is coupled with population increase. Climate change is coupled with our tendency to increase our consumption. The increase in consumption is not necessarily bad. It should not be looked at from a bad point of view, because there are large parts of the world which are actually severely malnutrited. They don't have enough nutrition. And if you have to bring them up, you have to provide that extra nutrition. And that extra nutrition will require extra crops, extra production. And that is where the availability of land for the purpose of production is limited. We already have a stress on our green cover, and most of the time we find that we cannot really decrease the green cover beyond a limit in order to maintain the overall climatic patterns. And now for this purpose, the higher crop productivity is the one which becomes very important for all of us to really look at. Now, how do you really achieve it? You have to be a catalyst for change in policies and practices. The policies and practices affect very severely on the water management part. One of the examples is already been talked about the free power, about the practically no charges for the water, which leads to certain bad practices. And because of those bad practices, not only the overall crop productivity suffers, but also simultaneously the availability of the water for other stakeholders also go under the stress. So it is very important to facilitate the exchange of information, knowledge and technology. We need to really work very strongly towards this. The climate change is not going to go away. And if we have to really combat the climate change, and if we have to maintain our lifestyle, even under the context of climate change, this issue is going to be very important. There is a lot of knowledge that is existing. There are a lot of information that is available. What happens at the climate change level? When the climate change happens, your hydrometeorological context changes. But that change in the hydrometeorological context may not necessarily be on the worst direction. But the similar kind of a hydrometeorological context that may be existing elsewhere in the world will be really happening to you. So if you exchange the knowledge, if you understand that going from a water rich area to a relatively water stressed area will require what kind of interventions, will require what kind of concerns, this will come through the facilitation of the exchange of knowledge and information. And the cross-disciplinary and intersectoral engagement becomes very important, especially from the water management point of view. Because in case of water, we are all connected to each other. And since we are all connected to each other, it becomes very important that various disciplines who are impacting the other disciplines have to really merge together and come to a solution which is beneficial to all. Now, for example, we have a heavy nitrogen pollution in our groundwater all across the northern parts of the India. And most of this nitrogen is coming from where? Most of the nitrogen is coming out of the fertilizers. And there is a excessive fertilizer use because there is an excessive water use. When you have large amount of water available in the field, you have to put in good number of, a larger amount of fertilizer in order to see that the necessary concentration is achieved. But in the process, you'll end up adding more and more salts to the soil. So a multidisciplinary kind of an environment is needed where you have to regulate the fertilizer use, where you have to regulate the water use and maintain the soil productivity. Then you will be able to maintain your crop productivity, and consequently you will be able to prevent hunger and manage the development. And for that, of course, the research and support and capacity development are something that becomes very, very important. Huge amount of work is needed if we have to really look at the various goals of the action plan. And one of the very important goals of the action plan is the modernization and O&M of irrigation systems. This is a very important topic that is not being touched in the country in a very systematic manner. We have primarily allowed the water to be free, and being water being free, we are simply trying to create assets. We have created a lot of assets, and then we have allowed those assets to degenerate. After all, they are all man-made structures. They are all man-made interventions. They require the operation and maintenance strategies. But these strategies have not really been put to use in the manner that is required, because there is no revenue stream that is coming out of it. People don't understand that simply because I am getting the water for free, the water is actually free. Water is not actually free. It has been associated with a huge amount of cost, and that cost has to be repaid back in order to maintain that particular system. So these issues are something that requires to be really looked at very, very seriously if we have to manage our water use and if we have to manage our water systems. So from this angle, I feel that we need to really look at the situation, especially from the water management during the climate change kind of context is concerned. We need to really look at very, very seriously and very, very aggressively. And for that, the global level views are required, because there are huge amount of technology changes and technology gradients that are existing across the globe. And those gradients have to be minimized. The gradients have to be made flat so that everybody has equal kind of knowledge and everybody has equal kind of capabilities. For that, you will not only need the knowledge, you will also need the investments. The investments will also have to flow appropriately. And for all these issues, there has to be a necessity for working with an action plan and working towards the achievement of the sustainable development goals on which this action plan has been based. I will not go in much detail because the time is extremely limited. We don't want to really look at all the other issues. And I would like to conclude my presentation because I think already I have come to about 15 minutes. I'm thankful to once again to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and all the organizers for having given me the opportunity to speak. And I'll be happy to interact with various stakeholders and various people in the audience as and when the opportunity arises. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pandya. Thank you very, very much. I know such a vast subject is very difficult to be concluded within 15 minutes. We shall be looking forward in future convenient dates where we can have a very detailed discussion on this. We would like to conclude this session. I would like to specifically thank Dr. Pradhan, Mr. Dr. Mukherjee, Mr. Kumar, Mr. Gupta, and finally, Mr. Pandya again. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. So thank you for joining for this session. Our next session would be roundtable on policies for green agenda. We have Mr. Manjeev Singh Puri, Honorary Distinguished Fellow of TERI, and who is also the India's former ambassador to EU. He has flown from Delhi to join us in this session. Along with him, we have Consuls General of Australia and Italy here with us at the chamber. Our additional Chief Secretary, Department of Power, Government of West Bengal, will be joining us online. This roundtable on policies for green agenda would commence at 3:15. Would request you to please join us back. For YouTube and LinkedIn, this session would be ongoing. For Facebook, we are going to close this session and going to relive again at 3:15. See you. Thank you.